good evening, dear friends, and a very warm welcome to each one of you. Wherever you're listening from tonight, perhaps tucked safely under the blankets, curled up in your favorite quiet corner of the house, or lying somewhere peaceful, while the rest of the world slowly fades into the background, I'm truly glad you're here with me. Take a long, slow breath in, and let it out gently. Feel your shoulders soften and drop. Maybe pull the blanket or duvet up just a little higher, and allow the day to quietly slip away from you. London fog lay thick upon the city that autumn evening. At 221 B. Baker Street, Holmes sat idle, craving challenge. Then came the urgent knock. Sir Reginald Thorne found dead in the Thames near London Bridge. His body bore marks of drowning, yet his pockets were turned out as if robbed. Scotland Yard saw simple suicide by a troubled merchant. But Holmes saw a link, a faint chemical burn on the right hand, shaped like a crescent. One link in a chain that would bind a killer. The game is afoot. Chapter 1. The First Link. I set down these events as they occurred in the autumn of 1892, when the fog descended upon London like a heavy woolen curtain, thick with the sharp bite of coal smoke and the dank rot of the Thames. That evening, at 221 B. Baker Street, the coal fire in our sitting room burned steadily, casting a warm orange glow across the scattered chemical apparatus and the worn leather armchairs. The 17 steps from the street had creaked under my boots as I returned from a brief walk, bringing with me the chill dampness that clung to my overcoat like an unwelcome guest. Holmes sat motionless by the window, his long fingers steepled beneath his chin, staring into the swirling gray beyond the glass, as though willing some puzzle to present itself. The silence was broken by a sharp rap at the street door below, followed almost at once by Mrs. Hudson's familiar tread ascending the stairs. She knocked once, entered with a small silver tray, and announced in her brisk way, "A telegram, Mr. Holmes, and Inspector Lestrade himself is following close behind. He looks half-drowned." The telegram envelope was damp, its edges curling, and carried the faint smell of river mud. Holmes took it without rising, slit it open with a paper knife, and read the brief lines aloud in a low voice. Thorne dead. Body in Thames near London Bridge. Apparent suicide. Note found. Consult urgently. Lestrade. Before I could frame a question, heavy footsteps sounded on the stairs and Lestrade burst in, hat in hand, overcoat glistening with fog drops. The inspector's boots left dark prints on the rug. The earthy scent of Thames silt followed him like a shadow. "Mr. Holmes," he began without preamble, "Sir Reginald Thorne, shipping merchant of Wapping, pulled from the water at dawn by a mudlark. Pockets turned out, watch gone. Suicide note in his breast pocket. Coroner says drowning, but the bruises on the arms, too many for a man who simply jumped." Holmes rose at last, drew a pipe from the Persian slipper on the mantel, and began to fill it with slow, deliberate movements. The rich aroma of shag tobacco soon mingled with the coal smoke and the damp wool of Lestrade's coat. "The note?" Holmes asked. Lestrade produced a sodden scrap of paper, its ink run, but still legible. "Debt's too great. Forgive me, Amelia." He laid it on the table beside the gas lamp. The flame flickered, throwing shadows across the blurred words. Holmes bent over it, then straightened. "We shall go to the morgue at once." "Watson, your coat." The hansom cab we hailed rattled through fog-choked streets, wheels grinding over wet cobblestones with a steady, hypnotic clatter. Big Ben tolled 9 as we crossed Westminster Bridge. The deep bronze note vibrated through the mist. Inside the cab, the leather seats were cold and slick, and the air held the lingering odor of previous passengers' tobacco. Lestrade recounted what little he knew. Thorne, last seen leaving his warehouse the previous evening. Wife at home alone, business troubles mounting for months. The morgue in Whitehall was bitterly cold, the stone walls seeming to drink the warmth from our bodies the moment we entered. The attendant led us down a dim corridor lit by gas jets. Our footsteps echoed sharply on the tiled floor. Sir Reginald Thorne lay on a zinc slab beneath a sheet that smelled faintly of carbolic soap. When the sheet was drawn back, the bloated features and waterlogged skin told their own story. Yet Holmes's attention fixed at once upon the right hand. A crescent-shaped chemical burn, red and angry against the pallid flesh, marred the palm. "The first link, Watson," Holmes murmured, producing his magnifying glass. "This burn, caustic, precise in shape, from concentrated potassium hydroxide commonly used in soap boiling and certain dockside processes. The link. Such a mark is not acquired by casual contact. It speaks of a recent, a forceful grip upon a vessel or tool containing the substance. The forge. I recall the case of the stockbroker's clerk, where a similar alkaline stain on the fingers betrayed the forger's secret press. The chemical residue connected night work to daylight alibi, much as the reddish clay in the Red-Headed League affair traced the criminal's boots to the very cellar where the tunnel was dug. In that instance, the ground itself remembered every step the man took, forging an unbreakable chain when he least expected it. The chain. Therefore, Sir Reginald was not brooding at home nor leaping in despair. He was at a Thames side warehouse handling lye shortly before death. The link forges strong. Did you see it form? The bind. I confess the connection had escaped me until that moment. The cold of the slab chilled my fingertips as I leaned closer. Holmes continued his examination, turning the dead man's boots. Black Wapping silt clung to the soles, gritty and textured like wet clay. In the coat pocket he found a torn silver cufflink engraved with the initials E.B., not Thorne's own. "Another link," Holmes said softly. "Silver, hallmarked 1885, torn away in violence. The link. The initials belonged to another, likely the man with whom he struggled. The forge. Consider the adventure of the blue carbuncle. A lost hat, sweat-stained and peculiarly shaped, led directly to the thief's habits and the commissionaire's routine. Here, too, a small object remembers its owner and binds the chain. The chain. Thorne grappled with someone bearing those initials. What chain would you build from these observations, Watson? I'm the bind." Lestrade grunted in astonishment. Holmes drew a telegram stub from the lining of the coat, creased, dated the previous day. "Meet at midnight. Urgent. Phantom." The paper carried the faint smell of printer's ink and river damp. "The Phantom of the Thames," Holmes said, eyes gleaming with that peculiar light. "A name whispered along the docks for years, a smuggler who brands his warnings with a crescent of lie. The link. This summons connects the burn, the struggle, the river. The forge. It recalls the telegram in a study in scarlet that lured Jefferson Hope to his vengeance. Deception delivered by wire, just as the word Rach, scrawled in blood, forged the first link to a transatlantic revenge. The chain. Thorne was not a suicide. He was murdered. Holmes saw 3 links. How many did you spot? The bind. Back at Baker Street, The fire had been replenished. Its warmth was welcome after the morgue's chill. Holmes paced before the hearth, pipe in hand, while I sipped hot tea that tasted faintly of tannin and comfort. The fog pressed against the windows, muffling the distant clop of handsome horses and the low wail of a river foghorn. Mrs. Hudson brought a decanter of brandy. Its sweet burn steadied my nerves. 3 links already, Holmes mused. The burn, the cufflink, the telegram. Each observation connects to the next. A chain begins to form. Looking back, I should have seen the pattern sooner. The rain had started again, tapping insistently at the panes like impatient fingers. You, dear reader, may have already deduced the direction this chain will lead. The first link forged. The chain begins. To Chapter 2. Forging connections. The following morning dawned gray and heavy, the fog still clinging to London's streets like wet flannel, carrying with it the perpetual bite of coal smoke from 1,000 chimneys and the faint underlying rot of the Thames. At 221B Baker Street, the coal fire had been freshly stoked. Its steady crackle filled the sitting room, while the aroma of strong breakfast tea rose from the pot on the table. I buttered toast, the knife scraping crisply against the crust, as Holmes stood by the window, pipe in hand, watching the blurred shapes of hansoms pass below. The 17 steps had already echoed twice with Mrs. Hudson's tread, once with the post, once with hot water, and now she bustled in to clear plates, her apron faintly scented with carbolic from the morning scrubbing. 3 links already. Watson, Holmes said without turning. Burn from lie. Cufflink marked E.B., telegram signed Phantom. Today we forge the next connections. He drew deeply on his pipe. The rich shag tobacco mingled with the warm leather smell of our armchairs, and the damp newspaper I had spread open to the morning's scant report of Sir Reginald Thorne's death. We finished quickly, donned our overcoats, the rough tweed of mine still holding yesterday's chill, and descended to the street. Our first call was Thorne's Mayfair residence. The hansom rattled over slick cobblestones, wheels hissing through shallow puddles, while Big Ben struck 10 in the distance, each deep note muffled by fog. Lady Amelia Thorne received us in the drawing-room, where a bright fire snapped in the grate, and the air held the comforting scent of polished oak and faint lavender from a bowl of dried flowers. She was pale but composed, dressed in unrelieved black, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "Gentlemen," she said, voice low, "this horror has left me quite undone. Reginald was troubled. Debts, yes, but suicide. I cannot credit it." Holmes settled into an armchair whose worn velvet was smooth under his palm, and leaned forward. "Madam, when did you last see your husband?" "Yesterday evening, about 7:30. He said he must go to the warehouse to check a late shipment. He kissed my forehead, quite absently, and left." "And you remained here alone?" "With the servants. I retired early. The fog was so thick I could scarcely see the lamps across the square." Holmes's eyes narrowed. On a small escritoire beside her chair lay an opened telegram. He gestured toward it. "May I?" She nodded. The paper was fresh, dated that very morning, but the handwriting matched the style of the stub found on the body. "From a friend in the country," she said quickly. "Condolences." Holmes returned it without comment, but I saw his gaze linger on the faint crease marks. The link was there. "Did you forge it before Holmes?" We took our leave, the front door closing behind us with a heavy thud. Outside, a newsboy shouted headlines, his voice hoarse. I bought a damp copy whose ink came away on my fingers. Next, we traveled east to Wapping, the cab jolting over bridges where the river smell grew stronger, mud, fish, and the sharp tang of tar from moored barges. The warehouse of Thorn and Blackwood stood squat and soot-stained beside the water. Its double doors hung open, exhaling the mingled odors of wet sacking, machine oil, and, distinctly, carbolic soap from the cleaning vats. Mr. Elias Blackwood met us inside the counting-house, a broad man in his 40s, with a booming voice and silver cufflinks that caught the gaslight. They were plain, unmarked. "Dreadful business, gentlemen," he said, wiping his hands on a rough cloth. "Reginald and I built this firm from nothing. Debts? Yes, shipments lost at sea, but murder? Preposterous." Holmes wandered to a row of lye barrels, their wooden staves stained dark where liquid had spilled. He dipped a finger near, not touching, and sniffed. The caustic fumes stung the air. "You quarreled recently?" "Business differences, nothing more." "Your whereabouts last night?" "Here, until midnight. Ask any of the night watchmen." A clerk brought forward the night ledger. Holmes scanned it, noting the entries written in different inks at different times. A small discrepancy in the clocking-in column caught his eye. "Curious," he murmured. Outside, the foghorn groaned low and mournful, while rain began to tap steadily on the tin roof. Our third visit took us to Victor Hargrove's offices near the Royal Exchange. The city streets were busier here, hansoms splashing past, the clatter of hooves on stone echoing off tall buildings. Hargrove received us in a tobacco-thickened room, pacing before a coal fire that threw heat against the chill draft from the window. His boots bore traces of dark silt, whopping mud, unmistakable. "Thorn undercut my bids for months," he growled. "Ruined 2 contracts. But I didn't kill him." "Where were you last night?" I asked. "My club in St. James's. The porter will confirm." Holmes opened a drawer at Hargrove's invitation and lifted a single leather glove, its palm stained with the same yellowish residue as Thorn's burn. "Explain this." "Old stain. I visited a soapworks weeks ago." The glove was too large for Hargrove's hand. Holmes set it down without remark. "What chain would you build from these observations?" We pressed on to the Thorn household once more, this time to question the valet, Thomas, in the servants' hall below stairs. The narrow room smelled of boiled cabbage and coal smoke. A small fire sputtered in the grate. Thomas was a thin, anxious man whose right hand bore a fresh crescent burn, red against pale skin. "How came you by that mark?" Holmes demanded. "Accident with cleaning solution, sir. 2 days ago." "You accompanied your master to the warehouse yesterday?" "No, sir. I remained here." His eyes flickered toward the doorway. A moment later, young Edgar Thorn, the nephew, appeared unannounced, brushing rain from his coat. "I heard you were here," he said. "Uncle's death leaves me his residuary legatee. Bitter coffee?" He poured from a pot on the hob. The bitter taste lingered on my tongue as we spoke. Edgar's boots were clean, no trace of mud. "I was in Brighton," he added. "Telegram will prove it." Holmes said little, but his silence was eloquent. As we left the house, the rain had strengthened, drumming on our hats like impatient fingers. Back at Baker Street, the fire welcomed us with a roar. Holmes paced before it, violin in hand, plucking idle notes that mingled with the crackle of coals. "Links multiply, Watson," he said at last. "Burns on 2 hands, telegrams that echo one another, mud that travels, alibis that waver. The chain takes shape." Mrs. Hudson brought hot tea. Its steam warmed my face while the fog pressed against the window panes like a living thing. Big Ben tolled 6, deep and solemn through the mist. You, dear reader, may already see connections I missed at the time. Watson was learning, but slowly. Did you spot the next link before Holmes? Links forging. The chain takes shape. Chapter 3. The chain grows. The third day of our investigation opened under a sky the color of wet slate. The fog thinner now, but still heavy with the acrid sting of coal smoke, and the ever-present reek of Thames mud that seemed to rise from every gutter and grating. At 221 B. Baker Street, the coal fire had been banked high overnight. Its steady crackle greeted us as we breakfasted on kippers and strong tea, the hot liquid warming my palms against the chill that had seeped through the window frames. Holmes stood by the mantel, filling his pipe from the Persian slipper, the rich tobacco scent blending with the faint, carbolic tang that still clung to my coat from the morgue 2 days earlier. He reviewed the notes I had made the previous evening, his long fingers turning the pages with deliberate care. Burns on 2 hands, Watson, thorns and the valets, telegrams that echo one another, mud that travels but does not lie. Today we return to the river's edge and see what fresh links the ground itself will yield. He drew upon the pipe thoughtfully, eyes gleaming with that peculiar light, then reached for his ulster. The rough tweed rasped against my own as we descended the 17 steps and hailed a hansom in the street below. The cab rattled eastward through fog-shrouded thoroughfares, wheels grinding over cold cobblestones slick with overnight rain. Big Ben struck 11 as we crossed London Bridge. The deep bronze peal rolled out over the water like a warning. We alighted near the spot where the mudlark had found Sir Reginald's body, close by one of the massive stone piers. The tide was low, exposing shelves of black silt that gave off a sharp, briny odor mingled with the coal smoke, drifting from passing barges. Footsteps squelched as we approached. Lestrade waited already, collar turned up, breath visible in the damp air. "Found something overnight, Mr. Holmes," the inspector said, gesturing toward the mud. "Drag marks, 2 sets. One matches the pattern of Thorne's boots, the other's larger, deeper. And this." He held out a sodden leather glove, palm uppermost. Yellowish stains discolored the inner surface, lye residue unmistakable. The glove was large, well worn, the leather cracked but supple. Holmes took it, turned it slowly, then lifted a folded scrap of paper that had been tucked inside the cuff. The note, inked in haste, read, "Phantom demands final payment tonight. No more delays." "The chain lengthens," Holmes murmured. He knelt, magnifying glass in hand, tracing the drag marks. The mud was textured like furrowed clay, cold and clinging to his fingers. "Observe. The larger prints veer toward the alley yonder, then return. A struggle, a push, a fall. The smaller set ends abruptly at the water's edge." The foghorn groaned low across the river. Rain began again, soft patters on our hat brims. We followed the alley, narrow and shadowed between warehouse walls. Gas lamps flickered feebly overhead, their light catching on wet brick. Halfway along, Holmes halted. A single footprint, large, deep, pressed into softer ground beside a stack of crates. Beside it lay a small brass button, engraved with a fouled anchor. "From a greatcoat," Holmes said, "not Thorne's. And here?" He pointed to a fresh splash of yellowish liquid on the wall, still faintly steaming in the cold. "Lie again. Spilled in haste." The caustic fumes stung our nostrils. I tasted bitter metal at the back of my throat. Lestrade whistled softly. Back to the warehouse. Then, at once, the hansom carried us the short distance to Thorne and Blackwood's premises. Inside, the vast space echoed with our footsteps on the wooden floorboards. The air was thick with machine oil, wet sacking, and, stronger now, the sharp bite of carbolic from the soap-boiling vats at the far end. Blackwood was absent, but a clerk summoned Thomas the valet at Holmes's request. The man entered nervously, right hand half hidden in his pocket. "Show me the burn again," Holmes commanded. Thomas extended his palm. The crescent mark was healing but still vivid. "You said cleaning solution, yet this matches the lye vat precisely." Thomas paled. I helped move barrels yesterday afternoon. Spilled some. After your master's death?" A long silence. "No, sir. Before. But I swear I never left the house that night." Holmes turned away without reply. We moved to the office. On Blackwood's desk lay an open ledger. Holmes flipped pages, noting entries in the two distinct hands. Figures had been altered, subtly, but enough to conceal a shortfall of several £1,000. "Embezzlement," he said quietly. "Thorne discovered it. Hence the phantom's demand." The door opened. Lady Amelia entered unannounced, cloak dripping, face pale beneath her veil. "I came for Reginald's private papers," she explained. "The firm must continue." Holmes bowed slightly, then, without preamble, lifted her right hand. On the palm, faint but unmistakable, an old crescent scar showed white against the skin. "From handling lye?" he asked. "An accident years ago," she answered quickly. Childhood folly in my father's works. Yet you wear no gloves today." She withdrew her hand. The room fell silent, save for the steady drip of rain through a cracked skylight and the distant clatter of crates being shifted. Holmes stepped closer to the ledger. "Madam, your husband's note spoke of debts. Yet these books show the debts were false, created to mask theft. By whom?" Lady Amelia's lips parted, then closed. She turned toward the door. I must go. After she left, Holmes paced the office, boots thudding softly. "The chain grows, Watson. The link, the fresh lye splash, the glove, the altered figures, the old scar on a lady's hand, all converge on this warehouse and the midnight summons. The forge. It recalls the Gloria Scott, where a tattooed forearm bore the mark of mutiny and bound past sin to present blackmail. The ciphered note and the dying confession forged links across decades. So, too, in the 5 orange pips, where dried seeds carried death's warning, their count and texture connecting a secret society to 3 generations of victims. The chain held fast because each link remembered its origin. Here, the lie brands not flesh alone, but motive and opportunity. The chain. Therefore, the phantom is no ghost, but one who walks these docks and knows these vats. Before Holmes explains, what does this evidence chain tell you? The bind. I shook my head. The connections were forming, but not yet whole. Lestrade grunted. Blackwood, perhaps, or one closer still. That evening at Baker Street the fire roared against the chill. Holmes played a slow air on the violin, the notes rising and falling like the river tide. The smell of shag tobacco curled through the room. Hot tea steamed on the table. Rain tapped the panes. Big Ben tolled 8 through the mist. The chain grows stronger, Watson. Logic binds what appearances would loose. You, dear reader, may have already glimpsed the phantom's face behind the fog. Holmes saw it clearly. Did you? The chain grows stronger. Logic binds. Chapter 4. testing the links, the fourth day broke with a reluctant dawn, the fog lifting just enough to reveal a sky the color of tarnished pewter, yet still laden with the familiar bite of coal smoke, and the damp, earthy reek of the Thames that never quite left London's air. At 221 B. Baker Street, the coal fire had burned low during the night. Its embers gave off a gentle warmth as Holmes and I took a hurried breakfast of toast and bitter coffee, the dark liquid sharp on the tongue. Holmes paced before the hearth, his slippers scuffing the threadbare rug, while he reviewed the growing collection of notes pinned to the mantel. The violin rested silent on its stand. Instead, he drew thoughtfully on his pipe, the rich shag tobacco curling upward to mingle with the leather scent of our armchairs, and the faint carbolic trace still lingering on my coat. 4 days, Watson, and the chain has 6 visible links: burns, cufflink, telegrams, mud, ledger discrepancies, Lady Amelia's scar. Today we test them. Weak links will shatter, strong ones will hold. He set the pipe aside, reached for his ulster, and we descended the 17 steps into the street. Our first test came at Elias Blackwood's private residence in Kensington, reached by hansom whose wheels clattered over damp cobblestones. The house stood tall and narrow, its brass knocker gleaming dully in the gray light. Blackwood himself opened the door, dressing gown hastily tied, eyes wary. We were shown into a small study where a coal fire crackled fitfully. The air held the comforting smell of old books and pipe tobacco. Holmes wasted no time. Your ledger shows alterations, figures inflated to conceal losses. Thorne discovered this. Blackwood stiffened. Business is complex. Adjustments are routine. Yet the ink differs. Fresh entries over old. Holmes produced the glove found by the river. This bears your size, your warehouse lie, and the initials E.B. on the torn cufflink match yours precisely. Blackwood laughed too loudly. I have alibis. 3 watchmen saw me at the warehouse until 1 in the morning. He rang for his housekeeper. She confirmed the times. Holmes nodded once. The timestamps hold, for now. The link bent, but did not break outright. We left with Blackwood's uneasy gaze following us to the door. Next, we called upon Lady Amelia at a quiet tea shop in Piccadilly, chosen for discretion. Rain pattered against the tall windows. Inside, the clink of china and the warm scent of scones and fresh tea provided brief respite from the chill. She sat alone at a corner table, veil lifted, hands steady around her cup. Holmes slid into the seat opposite. "Your scar, madam. From lie, you said. Yet it matches the brand shape of the phantom's warnings. A childhood mishap in my father's soapworks, nothing sinister. And the telegram on your desk yesterday, same hand as the one summoning your husband? Condolences from a cousin, nothing more." Holmes leaned closer. "You were seen near Wapping the evening before last. A cabman remembers a lady in black asking directions to the warehouse." She paled, but held his gaze. "I went to retrieve papers Reginald left behind. I returned home before midnight. A maid's statement, produced from her reticule, corroborated the hour. The link of suspicion stretched taut but held, no outright fracture. The rain drummed harder outside as we departed. Victor Hargrove's club in St. James's formed our third trial. The porter admitted us to a smoke-thickened lounge where gas lamps hissed softly and the fire roared against the cold. Hargrove sat in a deep armchair, newspaper open, boots polished, but bearing faint traces of dark silt when Holmes bent to examine them unobtrusively. "You threatened Thorne over lost contracts," Holmes stated. Words in anger. Oh, I never acted. This glove from the alley. Lye-stained your size. Gunpowder scent on your coat sleeve. Hargrove snorted. I shoot at the range twice weekly. As for the glove, hundreds like it on the docks. He summoned the club porter. The man swore Hargrove had sat in that very chair from 9 until 1, playing cards with witnesses. Holmes measured the glove against Hargrove's hand. It was a full size too large. Planted, then, Holmes murmured. The link shattered cleanly. Hargrove was not the wearer. We left him glowering into the fire. The valet, Thomas, required a fourth test, conducted in a modest public house near the Strand, where the air smelled of spilled ale, pipe smoke, and damp wool. Thomas sat hunched over a half-pint, right hand bandaged now. Holmes spoke quietly. Your burn came from the vat, not cleaning solution. You lied. I panicked, sir, but I never harmed the master. You saw Blackwood and Thorne argue that evening? Yes, about money, raised voices. Then Thorne left alone. Thomas produced a pawn ticket dated the night of the death. He had visited a broker in Whitechapel at 11, receipt stamped. The times aligned with the struggle window. The link strengthened. Thomas a witness, not perpetrator. The bitter taste of ale lingered as we stepped back into the rain. A fifth probe took us to Edgar Thorne's lodgings in Bloomsbury. The young man received us in a cramped sitting room, fire low, coffee pot steaming on the hob. His boots were spotless. No mud, no lie. Uncle's will favors me, he admitted. But I was in Brighton. Here, telegrams. The messages confirmed arrival and departure. Hotel staff could be wired for verification. Edgar's nervous manner spoke of debt, not guilt. Holmes nodded. Innocent suffering under suspicion. The link broke as red herring. Finally, a whispered dockside rumor led us to a tavern near the warehouses as dusk fell. Foghorns wailed, gas lamps flared yellow. An informant in a corner booth muttered of the Phantom, a name Blackwood had used in jest years ago for late shipments. As we spoke, Blackwood himself appeared at the door, coat collar high, eyes searching. He saw us, turned sharply, and hurried into the fog. Holmes gave chase. Footsteps pounded on wet planks, rain lashing our faces. We lost him near the water's edge, but the pursuit confirmed one truth. The quarry felt the chain drawing tight. Back at Baker Street that night, the fire blazed high, its warmth welcome after the cold docks. Holmes paced, pipe in hand, while hot tea steamed on the table and Big Ben tolled 10 through the mist. Weak links shattered, Hargrove's glove, Edgar's inheritance fears. Strong ones hold. Blackwood's ledger, Thomas's witness, the Phantom's brand. Mrs. Hudson brought brandy. Its sweet burn steadied us. The fog pressed against the windows like a living thing. The true chain emerges. Chapter 5. The chain tightens. By the fifth morning, the fog had thinned to a pale veil, yet it still carried the sharp sting of coal smoke from the river steamers and the ever-present damp rot of Thames mud that clung to every boot and hem in London. At 2:21, B. Baker Street, the coal fire roared against the chill, its crackle a steady counterpoint to the clink of teacups, as Holmes and I finished a hurried breakfast of toast and strong black coffee, the bitter taste lingering on my tongue. Holmes stood before the mantel, fingers steepled under his chin, eyes fixed on the pinned notes and scraps we had gathered, burnt matches, ledger pages, the stained glove, the crescent-scarred photograph of Lady Amelia's hand taken discreetly by a street photographer 2 days earlier. The violin lay untouched. Instead, he reached for his pipe, drawing deeply so that the rich shag tobacco mingled with the warm leather of our armchairs and the faint, carbolic trace on my medical bag. "The chain has held through every test, Watson," he said at last, voice low and intense. "Blackwood's alibis waver under scrutiny. The ledger forgeries point directly to him. The Phantom's crescent brand matches both the lye vats and the scars we have seen. Tonight, we draw it tight." He set the pipe down with decision. "We set a trap at the warehouse. Lestrade will bring men. You and I will be the bait." We prepared swiftly. Holmes sent a telegram in Blackwood's own cipher, lifted from the office desk, reading, "Final payment tonight. Midnight. Phantom demands all." The message would reach Blackwood within the hour. Then we donned dark ulsters, checked my service revolver, its cold steel reassuring in my pocket, and descended the 17 steps to hail a hansom. The cab rattled eastward through gaslit streets, wheels hissing over wet cobblestones, Big Ben tolling 9 as we crossed the bridge. Rain began again, soft and steady, drumming on the roof like impatient fingers. We reached Wapping under cover of darkness. The warehouse loomed black against the river, its double doors ajar, exhaling the mingled scents of machine oil, wet sacking, and the sharp, caustic bite of the lye vats within. Lestrade waited in the shadows with 2 constables. Their boots left faint prints in the mud outside. Holmes whispered instructions, positions behind crates, lanterns hooded. Then he and I slipped inside. The vast space echoed with our footsteps on the wooden planks. A single gas jet burned low near the office door, casting long shadows. The air was cold, damp, heavy with river mist that drifted through gaps in the walls. We waited in silence. The foghorn groaned distantly across the water. Rain pattered on the tin roof above. At 5 minutes to midnight, the outer door creaked. Heavy footsteps approached, deliberate, cautious. Elias Blackwood emerged into the dim light, greatcoat collar high, a lantern in one hand, a stout cudgel in the other. His face was pale, eyes darting. "Thorne's ghost," he called softly, voice echoing. "Show yourself." Holmes stepped forward from the shadows. "No ghost, Mr. Blackwood. Only justice," Blackwood started, cudgel rising. "Holmes, what devilry is this? You lured Sir Reginald here with the Phantom's name. You struggled. You pushed him into the Thames after branding his hand in warning, a final demand for silence over your embezzlement." Blackwood laughed, harsh and short. "Lies. I was at home. Your watchman's times were altered, ink fresh on old entries. The cufflink torn from your sleeve bears your initials. The lye burn on Thorne's palm matches the vat behind you." Blackwood's eyes flicked to the shadows. He saw the glint of Lestrade's lantern, heard the soft scrape of boots. Panic crossed his face. He lunged toward a side door. Holmes moved faster, tackling him to the planks. The cudgel clattered away. Blackwood's fist struck Holmes's shoulder. I drew my revolver, shouting for Lestrade. The constables rushed in. Blackwood fought wildly, coat tearing, but numbers prevailed. Handcuffs clicked shut with a metallic snap. In the struggle, a folded letter slipped from Blackwood's inner pocket. Holmes retrieved it, unfolded the damp paper under the gas jet. It was in Lady Amelia's hand. "Elias, the books are discovered. Reginald knows. End it tonight or we are ruined." The ink had run slightly from the rain, but the words were clear. "The chain tightens," Holmes said, voice calm amid the scuffle. "Lady Amelia was complicit in the forgery. You acted to protect the scheme and yourself. The link, the midnight summons, the brand, the shove, all converge on this spot and this motive, the forge. It recalls the Boscombe Valley mystery, where a father's dying cry and footprints in soft earth linked a son to patricide until the true weapon, a weighted coat, and the bloodstains on the sleeve forged the chain to the real killer, the blackmailer who had driven father and son apart. There, too, a hidden letter revealed the deeper motive. Here the same pattern holds. The chain. Blackwood, your phantom is unmasked. Holmes saw the final connection. Did you? The bind. Blackwood sagged between the constables, defiance gone. He threatened to expose us both. I only meant to frighten him. The push, the river, took him. His voice broke. Lestrade led him away. The warehouse doors closed with a heavy thud. We returned to Scotland Yard by hansom, the rain now a steady downpour, wheels splashing through puddles. In an interview room, warmed by a small coal fire, Blackwood made a full statement. Embezzlement begun 3 years earlier. Thorne's discovery. The phantom legend revived to terrify him into silence. The branding with lie was a warning. The final meeting meant to buy time. Panic had done the rest. Back at Baker Street near dawn, the fire still burned. Holmes paced slowly, pipe in hand, while hot tea steamed on the table and the first gray light filtered through the fogged windows. Mrs. Hudson had left brandy. Its sweet warmth steadied my shaking hands. The chain tightens around him now, Holmes said quietly. No escape remains. Big Ben tolled 4, deep and solemn. The river foghorn answered faintly, as though the Thames itself acknowledged the end of the hunt. The chain tightens. No escape now. Chapter 6. Links to the past. The 6th day dawned colder than any before, the fog having lifted overnight to reveal a pale winter sun that did little to warm the streets of London. The air still carried the sharp tang of coal smoke from the chimneys and the persistent damp earth smell of the Thames, now mingled with the faint frost that rimed the cobblestones. At 221 B. Baker Street, the coal fire burned brightly, its crackle a steady comfort as Holmes and I took breakfast in silence. Hot tea steaming in our cups, toast crisp beneath the knife, the bitter taste of marmalade cutting through the warmth. Holmes sat at the table with a fresh stack of documents before him. Blackwood's confession transcribed at Scotland Yard, the forged ledger pages, the damning letter in Lady Amelia's hand, and a bundle of old shipping manifests retrieved from the warehouse overnight by Lestrade's men. His pipe lay cold. Instead, his long fingers turned pages methodically, eyes sharp with the peculiar light that always appeared when the past began to illuminate the present. "The chain is nearly whole, Watson," he said at length, voice low. "But to understand why Blackwood revived the phantom legend, we must look backward. Motive is rarely born in a single season. It grows from roots long buried." He rose, crossed to the mantel, and took down a slim volume from the shelf, a faded pamphlet titled Dockside Legends of the Thames, 1870 to 1885. Its cover was rough leather, cracked at the edges, smelling faintly of mildew and old tobacco. We settled by the fire. Holmes opened the pamphlet to a marked page. "Listen. In the winter of 1878, a series of mysterious losses afflicted the Wapping wharves. Cargoes vanished from locked holds. Manifests were altered overnight. The watchman spoke of a shadow that left no footprint. The phantom. Those who crossed him woke to find a crescent burn of lye on their palms, a warning branded in pain. The mark came from soap-boiling vats, yet no culprit was ever caught. The losses ceased when one, Elias Blackwood, then a junior clerk, rose suddenly to partner in Thorne and Company. Holmes closed the book with a soft thud. Blackwood was the phantom, or invented him. The crescent brand was his signature, used to intimidate rivals and cover his early thefts. I leaned forward, the heat of the fire warming my face. Then Thorne knew. Likely not at first. Blackwood buried the past, built the firm on stolen capital. But when Thorne discovered the recent forgeries, thousands siphoned to cover old debts, the old fear returned. Blackwood revived the legend to terrify his partner into silence. The midnight summons, the branding, the push into the river. It was panic, but rooted in history. Holmes rose and paced slowly before the hearth, boots soft on the rug. We have the physical links. The lye burn on Thorne's hand, the torn cufflink bearing E.B., the gunpowder scent on Blackwood's coat from a warning shot fired in the alley. The timeline links. Thomas, the valet, saw the argument at 8. The forged ledger entries dated the same week. The telegram sent at 10 from a whopping office Blackwood frequented. The witness links. Thomas's testimony. The mudlark who heard a cry near midnight. The cabman who drove Lady Amelia near the docks. The motive links. Embezzlement begun in 1878, revived in 1892 when Thorne threatened exposure. And the final connecting link. He tapped the letter from Lady Amelia. Her complicity. She forged entries to shield her lover. When Thorne found proof, she urged Blackwood to act. All the links connected now, each observation forged to the next in an unbroken sequence. The fire popped, sending a shower of sparks up the chimney. Outside, a hansom clattered past, wheels grinding on frost-hardened stones. Holmes resumed his seat, drawing upon his pipe at last. The rich shag tobacco filled the room, soothing after the cold morning air. "This pattern is not new to me," he continued, eyes distant. "It recalls the crooked man, where a soldier's deformity and a lifetime of bitterness linked a childhood sweetheart to a present-day murder. There, the key found in the dead man's hand, brass, worn smooth, matched a door long forgotten. The tattoo on the murderer's arm bore the regiment's mark, forging a chain across 30 years. The man had carried his grudge like a brand, waiting for the moment to strike. So too here. Blackwood carried the phantom's crescent like a hidden scar, reviving it when the past threatened to surface. In both cases, the criminal believed time had erased the evidence. Yet objects remember, witnesses endure, and traces cling. The chain binds because the past is never truly buried. It waits only for the right observation to unearth it. I nodded, marveling once more at how Holmes wove disparate threads into inevitability. The room grew warmer. Mrs. Hudson entered with fresh tea, her footsteps light on the stairs, the tray clinking softly. The hot liquid steamed, its aroma cutting the tobacco haze. Big Ben tolled noon, deep notes rolling through the window panes. A faint foghorn answered from the river, as though the Thames itself acknowledged the closing of the case. "Lady Amelia?" I asked. "She will face charges as accessory, but her confession, already given to Lestrade, may lighten the sentence. Hargrove and Edgar are cleared, their red herrings shattered under scrutiny. The firm will pass to honest hands." Holmes set the pipe aside and leaned back, fingers steepled, past and present. One unbroken chain. The phantom was never a ghost, only a man who thought he could outrun his own shadow. The fire crackled steadily. Rain began again, soft patters against the glass like fading footsteps. You, dear reader, may have sensed the historical echo before this revelation. Watson was slow to see it. But the links were always there. Did you trace them to their origin? Past and present. One unbroken chain. Chapter 7. The Complete Chain. The 7th day arrived with a brittle clarity rare in London winter. The fog had retreated entirely, leaving the sky a pale washed blue, and the air sharp with frost, and the distant coal smoke that never quite departed the city. At 221 B. Baker Street, the coal fire had been built high against the cold, its steady crackle filling the sitting-room as Holmes and I awaited the gathering. The 17 steps had echoed all morning with Mrs. Hudson's comings and goings, fresh tea, extra chairs dragged from the spare room, a decanter of brandy placed discreetly on the sideboard. The room smelled of polished leather, hot tea, and the faint carbolic trace that still clung to Lestrade's overcoat from Scotland Yard. By 11 o'clock the principals were assembled. Elias Blackwood sat handcuffed between two constables in the largest armchair, face haggard, eyes downcast. Lady Amelia Thorne occupied the settee, veiled and rigid, hands clasped in her lap. Victor Hargrove stood by the window, arms folded, scowling at the street below. Edgar Thorne perched on a straight chair, nervous but relieved. Thomas the valet hovered near the door, hat in hand. Inspector Lestrade leaned against the mantel, notebook open, while I took my accustomed place beside Holmes at the writing table. The fire popped. Big Ben told the hour, deep notes rolling through the open window. Holmes rose, tall and composed, fingers steepled beneath his chin. "Gentlemen, madam," he began, voice calm and precise. "The chain is complete. Every link is forged, tested, and unbreakable. I shall now lay it before you, link by link, so that no shadow of doubt remains." He turned first to the physical evidence. The crescent burn on Sir Reginald's right palm, caustic potassium hydroxide, acquired in violent contact with a lye vat at the warehouse. Physical link 1. The torn silver cufflink engraved E.B. found in the dead man's pocket matches those Blackwood wears daily. The tear occurred during the struggle in the alley. Physical link 2. The stained leather glove recovered from the riverbank bears the same lye residue and fits Blackwood's hand precisely. It was dropped in haste after the push. Physical link 3. The gunpowder scent on Blackwood's coat sleeve comes from a warning shot fired to intimidate Thorne before the final confrontation. Physical link 4. These 4 items, burn, cufflink, glove, powder, place Blackwood at the scene and in violent contact with the victim. He moved to the timeline. Sir Reginald left his Mayfair home at 7:30. Thomas, the valet, witnessed an angry exchange with Blackwood at the warehouse shortly after 8. Timeline link 1. A telegram summoning Thorne to midnight, signed Phantom, was dispatched from a Wapping office Blackwood used regularly at 10 o'clock. Timeline link 2. The mudlark heard a cry near the bridge at 11:30. Thorne's body was found at dawn. Timeline link 3. Blackwood's watchman alibis were forged. Ink discrepancies prove the entries were altered after the fact. Timeline link 4. The sequence is unbroken. Argument, summons, struggle, murder. Next, the witnesses. Aunt Thomas saw the quarrel and later confessed his presence near the docks when he pawned a watch to cover debts. His burn came from assisting Blackwood move barrels earlier that day. Witness link 1. The cabman who drove Lady Amelia near Wapping at 10 confirmed her directions to the warehouse. Witness Link 2. The informant in the dockside tavern recognized Blackwood as the man who revived the old phantom tales to frighten rivals. Witness Link 3. Each voice corroborates the others. No contradiction stands. The motive followed. Blackwood embezzled from Thorne and Company for 14 years, beginning in 1878 when he invented the phantom to cover early thefts. Motive Link 1. Recent losses at sea forced him to forge ledgers to conceal the shortfall. Thorne discovered the fraud and threatened exposure. Motive Link 2. Lady Amelia, all complicit in the forgeries to protect her household and her liaison with Blackwood, urged him to silence her husband. Motive Link 3. Her letter, "End it tonight or we are ruined," sealed the intent. Greed, fear, and betrayal drove the act. Finally, the connecting link. The crescent brand itself, the phantom's historic signature, was revived not as random cruelty but as deliberate misdirection, meant to suggest a spectral avenger rather than a living man with a past to hide. Yet the brand betrayed him. The same lie used in the warehouse vats marked both victim and killer. This single symbol binds every preceding link, physical, temporal, testimonial, motivational, into one unbreakable whole. Holmes paused, eyes sweeping the room. Blackwood's head had sunk to his chest. Lady Amelia's veil trembled. Hargrove exhaled sharply. Edgar stared wide-eyed. Lestrade closed his notebook with a snap. Every link accounted for, Holmes concluded. The chain is complete. Elias Blackwood, you stand convicted by your own traces that objects, time, witnesses, and motive alike remember. The phantom is no more. Only a man who thought he could outrun evidence remains. Blackwood lifted his head, voice hoarse. I never meant murder, only to frighten him. The river took him. Yet you pushed, Holmes replied quietly, and the chain does not forgive intent alone. Lestrade stepped forward. Elias Blackwood, I arrest you for the murder of Sir Reginald Thorne. Lady Amelia Thorne, you will accompany us on a charge of accessory before the fact. The constables rose, handcuffs clinked. Blackwood offered no resistance as they led him toward the door. Lady Amelia stood, veil lifted now, face pale but composed. She glanced once at Holmes, gratitude or reproach I could not tell, then followed. The room emptied slowly. Hargrove muttered thanks and departed. Edgar shook my hand with fervent relief. Thomas lingered to stammer an apology before vanishing down the stairs. Lestrade paused at the threshold. Remarkable, Mr. Holmes. As always, you know my methods, Inspector. When the door closed, the fire seemed louder, the room suddenly still. Holmes returned to his chair, drew upon his pipe, and exhaled a long plume of smoke that curled toward the ceiling. The frost on the window panes began to melt in the fire's heat. Outside, a hansom clattered past, wheels sharp on the cold stones, every link accounted for. The chain complete. Chapter 8. Justice in Chains. The morning after the gathering at Baker Street dawned sharp and cold, the frost that had settled overnight glittering on every rooftop and railing, like scattered diamonds under a pale January sun. The fog had vanished completely for the first time in days, leaving London's streets crisp and audible, the clatter of hansom wheels on stone, the distant cries of street vendors, the steady toll of Big Ben marking the hour. At Scotland Yard, the air inside was warmer, heavy with the smell of coal smoke from the office grates, polished leather from the constables' belts, and the faint, carbolic tang that always lingered in the corridors. I arrived with Holmes shortly after 9. Lestrade met us at the entrance, face flushed from the cold outside and the satisfaction within. "Blackwood's in the holding room," the inspector said, leading us down the echoing hallway. "Lady Amelia is in a separate cell, quiet, composed, but she signed a full statement. No fight left in either of them." His boots clicked on the tiled floor. Our own footsteps followed in rhythm. The building hummed with subdued activity, telegraph keys tapping in the next room, a sergeant's low voice issuing orders, the occasional clank of iron keys on rings. We entered the interview chamber first. Elias Blackwood sat at a plain oak table, wrists manacled to a ring bolted into the wood, shoulders slumped beneath the rough prison jacket they had given him. His greatcoat hung on a peg behind him, still bearing the faint scent of gunpowder and river damp. A single gas jet burned overhead, casting harsh shadows across his face. 2 constables stood at the door. One held a notebook ready. Lestrade took the chair opposite. "Mr. Blackwood, you have been formally charged with the murder of Sir Reginald Thorne. The evidence has been reviewed by the Crown Prosecutor. Do you wish to add anything to your confession?" Blackwood lifted his head slowly. His eyes, once sharp with calculation, were dull now, rimmed with red. "I've said all there is," he muttered. "I never intended the river to take him. A push in anger, panic, that's all." His voice cracked on the last word. He glanced at Holmes, who stood silent near the wall, arms folded. "You've bound me tighter than these irons ever could, Mr. Holmes. Every trace I left, every link you forged, I see it now." Holmes inclined his head once. "The chain was of your own making, sir. Objects remember, men forget." Blackwood exhaled heavily, the sound ragged in the quiet room. "Tell Amelia, I never meant for her to suffer this." Then he lowered his gaze again, defeated. The constables moved forward. Lestrade nodded. They unlocked the manacles from the table ring, refastened them behind his back, and led him out. His footsteps dragged along the corridor, fading toward the cells below. The door closed with a heavy clang that echoed like the final note of a tolling bell. We moved to the adjoining room where Lady Amelia waited. She sat upright on a wooden bench, veil discarded, hands folded in her lap. A small coal fire in the grate offered scant warmth. She had drawn her shawl tighter against the chill. Her face was pale but composed, the lines of grief and guilt etched deeper than before. "Lady Amelia," Lestrade began gently, "your statement is complete. You aided in the forgery of ledgers to conceal Mr. Blackwood's thefts, and you wrote the letter urging him to confront your husband. The charge is accessory, before the fact to murder." She met his eyes without flinching. "I know what I have done, Inspector. Reginald discovered the truth 2 weeks ago. He was going to ruin us both, expose Elias, dissolve the firm, leave me destitute. I thought, if Elias frightened him, he would relent. I never imagined—" Her voice faltered. She pressed a handkerchief to her lips. "The guilt is mine as much as his." Holmes spoke then, voice low but clear. "Your complicity ends here, madam. The Crown may show leniency for your full confession and the absence of direct violence, but justice requires the chain to hold firm." She nodded once, slowly. "I accept that." A female warder entered. Lady Amelia rose without protest. The irons were light, more symbol than restraint, and she walked out with quiet dignity, footsteps soft on the stone. The door closed behind her. The room fell silent save for the crackle of the fire. Lestrade turned to us, rubbing his hands together for warmth, loose ends tied off. Hargrove's alibi confirmed by 3 club members. No further suspicion. Edgar Thorne's telegrams from Brighton checked with the hotel. He's clear. Thomas the valet gave evidence willingly. His pawn ticket and burn explained. The phantom legend dies with this case. The docks will breathe easier. Holmes nodded. The Yard's work was thorough, Inspector. The physical traces, burn, cufflink, glove were preserved admirably. Without them, the chain might have weakened. Lestrade gave a rare smile. Coming from you, that's high praise. We'll have the coroner's inquest tomorrow. The trial will follow swiftly. Blackwood's confession seals it. We left the building together. Outside, the frost still clung to the railings, our breath clouded in the sharp air. A hansom waited at the curb. We climbed in, the leather seats cold beneath us. The cab rattled toward Baker Street, wheels crunching over thin ice on the stones. Big Ben tolled noon as we passed Westminster. The deep peal vibrated through the crisp morning. Back at 221B, the fire welcomed us like an old friend. Mrs. Hudson had anticipated our return. Hot tea steamed on the table, its aroma cutting the chill we had brought in from the streets. Holmes shed his ulster, drew upon his pipe, and settled into his armchair. The rich tobacco scent filled the room, mingling with the warm leather and the faint frost damp of our coats. Blackwood's reaction was telling, Holmes mused. Defiance gone, only regret remained. Lady Amelia bore her chains with more composure, perhaps because she had foreseen them longer. I poured tea, the hot liquid warming my hands. Justice served then. The innocent cleared, the guilty bound. Holmes exhaled a slow plume of smoke toward the ceiling. The chain has done its work. Every link tested, every weak one shattered, the strong ones holding fast. London's streets are safer for it. Outside, a light snow began to fall, soft flakes drifting past the window like silent witnesses. The fire crackled steadily. Big Ben tolled the quarter hour. The phantom of the Thames was no more. Only echoes remained, bound by reason and evidence. The criminal bound. Justice served. Chapter 9. Links restored. The trial of Elias Blackwood and Lady Amelia Thorne commenced on the morning of 15th January 1893 in the Old Bailey, under a sky so clear and cold that the frost still clung to the stone steps outside the court like a thin silver veil. Inside the great hall, the air was thick with the mingled scents of polished oak. Coal smoke from the braziers set at intervals along the walls, and the faint carbolic wash that the attendants used to keep the place sanitary. Gas lamps hissed overhead. Their light fell harshly on the wooden benches where spectators sat hushed and attentive. Big Ben tolled 10 as the judge entered, robes rustling, and the proceedings began with the measured gravity that Victorian justice demands. Blackwood stood in the dock first, manacled, his once broad shoulders stooped beneath the weight of evidence and remorse. The prosecutor, a tall man with a voice like gravel underfoot, laid out the chain Holmes had forged, the lie burn on the victim's palm, the torn cufflink bearing E.B., the stained glove recovered from the riverbank, the forged ledger entries concealing 14 years of embezzlement, the damning letter in Lady Amelia's hand urging decisive action. Witness after witness followed. Thomas the valet recounting the angry exchange at the warehouse, the mudlark describing the midnight cry near London Bridge, the cabman confirming Lady Amelia's nocturnal journey to Wapping. Blackwood offered no defense beyond his earlier confession. His counsel spoke only in mitigation, pleading panic rather than premeditation. The jury retired for less than 2 hours. When they returned, the foreman pronounced the verdict: guilty of murder. Blackwood received the black cap. The sentence was death by hanging, to be carried out in 3 weeks' time at Newgate. Lady Amelia's trial followed the next day. She entered the dock unveiled, pale but erect, dressed in simple black. The charge was accessory before the fact. The evidence lighter but damning, the forged ledger pages in her handwriting, the letter she had written to Blackwood, her presence near the warehouse on the fatal night. Her counsel argued eloquently that she had acted under duress of financial ruin and misplaced loyalty, never intending violence. The jury deliberated longer, nearly 4 hours, but the verdict came: guilty. The judge, taking into account her full confession, her absence from the scene of the act, and her station, sentenced her to 7 years' penal servitude. She accepted the words without visible tremor, only inclining her head once before the warders led her away. The irons on her wrists were light, symbolic, yet they clinked softly as she passed from sight. With the verdicts delivered, the innocent parties found themselves at last cleared of shadow. Edgar Thorne, the nephew, attended the final day of proceedings in the public gallery. When the court rose, he approached me outside on the steps, breath clouding in the frosty air. "Dr. Watson," he said, voice thick with relief, "I fear the inheritance would forever taint me with suspicion. But Mr. Holmes's chain proved my telegrams true, and my boots clean of mud. The firm passes to me now, under new partners of honest character. I mean to restore it. I honor my uncle's name." He shook my hand firmly. The leather of his glove was smooth and warm against the cold. I wished him well. He departed with a lighter step, the frost crunching beneath his boots. Victor Hargrove fared better still. Freed early from suspicion when his club alibis held firm and the oversized glove proved planted, he resumed his shipping trade with renewed vigor. I encountered him by chance a week later near the Royal Exchange. He tipped his hat, voice booming. "Holmes saved my reputation, Doctor. No more undercutting from rivals. My bids stand on merit now. Tell him I owe him a case of the finest brandy." The coal smoke from passing carts drifted around us. I promised to convey the message. Thomas the valet, too, emerged unscathed. His testimony had been crucial, and in gratitude the new management of Thorne and Company retained him at increased wages. He wrote me a brief note, paper crisp, ink steady, expressing thanks for Holmes's methods that had spared him the noose of false accusation. The burn on his hand had healed to a faint crescent scar, a reminder rather than a mark of guilt. London itself seemed to exhale as the case concluded. The docks along Wapping grew quieter without the whispered legend of the phantom. Barges moved freely once more, their horns low and untroubled. The Thames flowed on, indifferent, its surface reflecting the gas lamps at night like scattered stars. In the streets, the fog returned by evening, softer now, carrying only the usual smells of coal smoke, damp wool, and distant river mud, no longer laced with the chill of murder unsolved. At 221B, Baker Street, that same week, Holmes and I sat by the fire as snow began to fall outside, soft flakes drifting past the window like silent confetti. The coal burned steadily. Hot tea steamed on the table, its aroma cutting the rich tobacco from Holmes's pipe. Mrs. Hudson had brought fresh scones. Their warmth lingered in my fingers as I buttered one. "The links are restored, Watson," Holmes said quietly, gazing into the flames. "Order returns when every trace is accounted for, every innocent cleared, every guilty bound. The chain served its purpose. Now it may rest until the next puzzle demands its forging. The link, justice, connects the broken to the whole once more. The forge. It recalls the Abbey Grange affair, where a brutal husband's abuse linked to a staged murder scene. The word rage, scratched in haste, and the hidden revolver forged the chain to the true victim's deliverance. There, too, the innocent suffered suspicion until logic restored them to light. The chain. So here, Edgar, Hargrove, Thomas, all freed by the same inexorable method. The bind. I nodded, watching the snow settle on the sill. Big Ben tolled 7 through the muffled streets. A hansom clattered past below, wheels crunching faintly on the thin white layer. The city moved on, gas lamps flickering to life, voices calling in the dusk, life resuming its steady rhythm. Order restored to London's streets. Chapter 10. By the fire at Baker Street. A week had passed since the sentences were pronounced at the Old Bailey. London had settled back into its familiar winter rhythm. The soft crunch of frost underfoot in the early mornings, the steady hiss of gas lamps being lit at dusk, the distant foghorns sounding across the Thames like weary sentinels. At 221 B. Baker Street, the coal fire burned with a steady, contented glow. Its warmth pushing back the chill that pressed against the window panes, where a light dusting of snow had begun to cling. Holmes sat in his usual armchair, legs stretched toward the hearth, pipe in hand. The rich aroma of shag tobacco drifted lazily upward to mingle with the comforting sense of hot tea and fresh scones that Mrs. Hudson had just brought up. I occupied the opposite chair, feet on the worn footstool, a copy of the evening paper folded on my knee, the headlines already faded from the case that had once gripped the city. The fire crackled softly, a log shifted, sending a shower of sparks up the chimney. Holmes drew upon his pipe thoughtfully, eyes half closed in that rare state of repose that followed the conclusion of a difficult affair. "The papers have moved on," I remarked, tapping the folded sheet. "Blackwood's execution is set for next Monday. Lady Amelia has been removed to Holloway. The docks speak no more of phantoms." Holmes nodded once. "As it should be. The chain served its purpose. Now it may lie dormant until the next puzzle demands its forging." He set the pipe aside and steepled his fingers beneath his chin. "Yet reflection is useful, Watson. Sit with me a while by this fire and let us review the method that bound the guilty and freed the innocent." I poured fresh tea for us both. The steam rose warm against my face, carrying the faint tannic bitterness that always steadied my thoughts after such cases. Holmes leaned back, gaze fixed on the dancing flames. "The chain of deduction," he began slowly, "is nothing more than observation linked by logic, each link forged from a single, precise fact that refuses to be ignored. In this affair, we began with 3 small observations: the crescent burn of lie on Thorne's palm, the torn cufflink engraved E.B., and the telegram signed Phantom. Each seemed trivial in isolation. Together, they formed the first unbreakable segment. From there, we tested every subsequent link: mud on boots, discrepancies in ledgers, alibis that wavered under scrutiny, scars on living hands, until no weak point remained. He paused, eyes gleaming faintly in the firelight. "Consider the Hound of the Baskervilles, that grim business on the moor. There, too, the chain began with trifles: phosphorescent paint on a hound's jaws, a boot stolen, then returned, a torn letter bearing the name Baskerville. Superstition clouded the view. Villagers saw a spectral beast. Yet each trace, paint that glowed under lantern light, footprints too large for any natural dog, the ciphered message, connected inexorably to Stapleton's scheme. The phosphorescence was no devilry, but chemistry. The hound no phantom but a starved animal smeared to terrify. The inheritance motive plain once the family history was unearthed. Observation defeated deception because the deceiver overlooked how stubbornly the material world remembers. A splash of paint, a footprint in peat, a scrap of paper. The chain held because every link was physical, testable, irrefutable. Holmes reached for his pipe again, drawing a slow breath. Here the same principle applied. Blackwood believed the river would erase his crime, that the legend of the phantom would obscure his hand. Yet the river gave back the body. The lie left its mark. The cufflink tore free in the struggle. He forgot that nothing vanishes entirely. Traces cling to skin, to cloth, to paper. When you eliminate the impossible, suicide by a man freshly burned with lie, a drowning without witnesses to a leap, the truth remains. Murder by one who knew the docks, who handled caustic daily, who profited from hidden thefts. Data, data, data. Without it we grope in fog. With it the chain tightens of its own accord. I sipped my tea, feeling the warmth spread through my chest. And why does observation so consistently defeat deception? Because deception requires invention, Holmes replied, and invention is fragile. The liar must construct an entire false world, alibis, explanations, legends. But the real world is stubborn. It leaves fingerprints, scents, inconsistencies. A single misplaced link, a burn that should not be there, a telegram dispatched from the wrong hour, cracks the facade. The criminal builds a house of cards. We need only find the one card out of place. In the Red-Headed League, the tunnel was betrayed by reddish clay on boots. In the Speckled Band, by a saucer of milk and a bell rope that led nowhere. Here, the crescent brand, meant to frighten, became the very sign that betrayed the forger of fear. He fell silent for a moment, listening to the soft patter of snow against the glass and the distant clop of a hansom passing below. The fire popped. Mrs. Hudson's footsteps faded down the 17 steps. The science of deduction, he continued, is no mysticism. It is patient attention to the ordinary until the extraordinary reveals itself. Every man leaves a trail, scuff marks on a carpet, ash in a pipe, ink on a finger. Ignore none of them. Forge them together. The chain emerges not by force, but by inevitability. I set my cup down, marveling once more at the quiet certainty in his voice. You make it sound simple. It is simple, Holmes said with a faint smile, only relentless. Outside, Big Ben tolled 9. The deep notes rolled through the snow-muffled streets. The fire burned lower now, casting long shadows across the room. Holmes rose, crossed to the window, and watched the flakes drift past the gaslight below. Until the next chain forges, dear listener, he said softly, almost to himself. The game continues. I smiled into the firelight. The warmth, the tobacco, the quiet companionship, these too were links in their own small chain. Until the next chain forges, dear listener. The game continues.